I came home to find my bed gone and my daughter-in-law smiling in it. My son said, "Dad, relax. It's our room now." I didn't argue. I just looked around and decided they'd chosen the wrong man to move. Before I tell you what really happened, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and let me know where you're listening from. Every story I share carries a piece of my life, and maybe a piece of yours too. Now, let me start from the beginning, before the day my son and his wife decided my bedroom was theirs. The morning I came back from my trip, the house was quiet. Too quiet. You know that kind of silence that feels wrong, like the calm before a storm? I'd been gone for 2 weeks, visiting an old fishing buddy up north. The drive back was long, but I was excited to return to the small things, the smell of coffee in my own kitchen, the creak of the porch swing, the sight of my late wife's rose garden. This house wasn't just a place to live. It was a promise. I built it brick by brick after Eleanor passed. She always said, "Walter, make sure it feels like home even when I'm gone." And I did. Every nail, every tile, every coat of paint carried her touch. My son Caleb had moved back in 3 years ago with his wife, Brianna. They said it would only be for a little while, just until they got back on their feet. I didn't mind. The place was big, and truth be told, it felt good to have company again. At first, it was peaceful. Brianna helped in the kitchen sometimes. Caleb and I would sit on the porch with a couple of beers, talking about the old days, his baseball games, the camping trips, the time he fell into the lake and came out laughing like a fool. I used to think, maybe this is what growing old gracefully feels like. But little by little, things changed. They started bringing in new furniture I hadn't approved. Then came the updates, rearranging the living room, moving my things around. When I'd ask about it, Caleb would laugh. "Dad, you've had it this way for 20 years. It's time for a modern touch." I let it slide. I told myself, they're young, let them feel at home. Every morning, I still followed my quiet routine. Up before sunrise, a cup of black coffee, sitting by the window watching the light crawl across the backyard. Sometimes, I'd hear Brianna upstairs, heels clicking, hairdryer humming, full of life, full of control. Caleb had always been softer, a good heart, but easily swayed. Even as a kid, when things got tense, he'd just look at the floor instead of speaking up. The last morning before my trip, I remember handing him the house keys. "Take care of this place, son," I said. "It's not just wood and walls. It's our story." He smiled, that same boyish grin he had when he was 10, and promised he would. I believed him. When I got home 15 days later, the air inside felt wrong. The smell hit me first, new paint, a perfume that wasn't mine. The pictures on the wall were gone. My wife's old clock was missing. Still, I tried to stay calm. Maybe they just cleaned. Maybe they moved some things. But when I opened my bedroom door, it wasn't my bedroom anymore. The mahogany bed Eleanor and I had shared for 25 years was gone, replaced by a sleek white frame covered in designer pillows. The peach walls were now painted gray. My photographs, our wedding, the kids when they were little, all gone. And just as I stood there frozen, Brianna appeared in the doorway, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Do you like it, Dad?" she said sweetly. "We redecorated. This room just fits us better." Her words sliced through me like glass. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. I wanted to shout, "How dare you?" But I didn't. I just looked at her. Calm. Too calm. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew this was only the beginning, and they had no idea what kind of man they were dealing with. But that peace, that quiet trust I once had, was about to end. I stood there, staring at the room that no longer belonged to me. It didn't feel real. The soft gray walls, the spotless bedding, the scent of her perfume, it was like someone had erased my life and written theirs over it. "Where's my bed?" I asked quietly. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. Brianna smiled, that same polished smile she wore at family dinners. "Oh, we moved it to the garage. Don't worry, Walter. It's safe. You'll sleep in the guest room now. It's cozier. Better for your back at your age." At my age. She said it softly, but it stung like an insult dressed as kindness. I swallowed hard. And you didn't think to ask me first, she shrugged, waving a hand like it was nothing. Caleb said you'd understand. We wanted to surprise you. A surprise. That's what she called it. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Where's Caleb? Upstairs, she said. We've been working non-stop getting everything ready. The place finally looks modern. She turned, brushing past me like I was invisible, a ghost haunting my own house. Her perfume lingered in the air long after she left. When Caleb finally came down, he looked groggy, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and the same nervous look he used to get as a kid. Hey, Dad, you're back early. Early, I repeated. I said I'd be home today. He looked away. Yeah, Bri thought you'd like the changes. The room needed a fresh start. I stared at him, my son. The boy I raised alone after Eleanor passed. The boy I taught to fish, to work hard, to never take what wasn't his. Caleb, I said slowly, you let her move my things without asking. He shifted, scratching the back of his neck, a tell he'd never outgrown. Dad, it's still your house, but come on, we live here too. Bree just wanted to make it feel like home for both of us. Home. The word hit me wrong. My home, I said, quiet but firm. Dad, don't make this a thing, okay? You've had the big room for years. We're starting a family soon. And I cut him off. Then get your own house, Caleb. He froze. What? You heard me. I stepped closer, calm but unshakable. If you need space, find your own place. This house was built by my hands, paid for with my years, not a son of yours. Brianna appeared again, a wine glass in her hand, trying to sound playful, but her tone was sharp. Walter, let's not overreact. We just wanted to make the place feel lighter. It's not like we threw your things away. She glanced at Caleb, then back at me. We even kept your old dresser in the garage. The garage. I could picture it. The damp air, the dust, the smell of oil and concrete. My memories boxed up like junk no one wanted. I walked downstairs without a word. They followed. When I opened the garage door, it felt like walking into a grave. There was my old dresser leaning against the wall, my photo with Eleanor cracked right across her smile, the bed frame disassembled and shoved into a corner beside boxes labeled Dad's stuff. I ran my hand along the wood. It was cold, rough, like touching a scar. See, Brianna said, sipping her wine. We kept everything. I turned to her. You kept the furniture, I said quietly. But you threw away respect. The air went still. Neither of them spoke. I picked up the cracked photo and held it close. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just felt something inside me go silent, heavy and final. Walter, Caleb started. Come on, we didn't mean... Stop, I said. My voice was low, steady. Just stop. The hum of the freezer and the slow drip of a pipe were the only sounds left. You both want space? I said finally. Fine, you'll have it, but not here. Brianna's smile broke. You can't be serious. This is our home too. Caleb's name. I raised my hand. No, his name isn't on that deed. This is my house. Always has been. Caleb's voice cracked. Dad, please don't do this. I looked at him. Really looked. The son I'd built a life for now standing beside a woman who treated me like furniture. I'm not doing anything, I said softly. You did. I turned toward the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. And just as I reached the top, I heard Brianna whisper, sharp and mocking. He's bluffing, but I wasn't. That's when I knew I would not stay silent. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table under the old yellow lamp, the light spilling across a pile of receipts and half-empty coffee mugs. The house felt colder, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Every sound, the fridge humming, the pipes groaning, echoed with something missing. Upstairs, Caleb and Brianna slept in my room. Their laughter earlier had faded into silence. I didn't go up. I couldn't. I just sat there staring at the cracked photo of Eleanor I'd pulled from the garage. Her smile, faint and warm, looked almost alive under the lamplight. It was as if she was asking me to stay strong, to protect what we built. I thought back to when Caleb was little. He'd run through these halls, tracking mud from the yard after baseball practice. I used to scold him, but I could never stay mad for long. He'd look up grinning and say, Sorry, Dad. I'll clean it up. And every time I forgave him. because that's what fathers do. But this time, this wasn't a mess. It was betrayal. The next morning, I went outside. The air was crisp, still carrying the bite of late autumn. I sat on the porch swing, our swing, and watched the sun crawl over the yard. For a moment, I almost felt peace again, but deep down, I knew something had shifted. Still, part of me needed to understand why. Why had my own son allowed this? Why had he stood by while someone else claimed what wasn't hers? Later that afternoon, I got my answer. Brianna was in the backyard, pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, not at first. But when I heard her laugh and say, "Once we finish the renovations, it'll be legally ours," my heart froze. Legally ours. She lowered her voice. "He's old, Nancy. He won't fight it. Once we've made enough improvements, we'll have a case for possession. I've already spoken to someone." My blood ran cold. I reached into my pocket, hit record, and captured every word. Her confidence was chilling. The arrogance, almost rehearsed. When she hung up, I stepped back into the house, my mind spinning. It wasn't just disrespect. It was a plan. That night, I went into Caleb's study while they were out. Bills were scattered across his desk. Credit card debt, overdue car payments, and one document that made my knees go weak. A loan for $27,500, secured against my house. The signature looked like mine, but the middle initial was wrong. A forgery. I sat there for a long time, holding the paper, listening to the old clock tick on the wall. There wasn't anger anymore, just a heavy, quiet ache. My son had done this. The same boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after long drives. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just breathed, slow and deep, until the shaking in my hands stopped. When I finally looked up, my eyes fell on Eleanor's picture again. Her words echoed in my mind. "Patience, Walt. Even storms pass if you wait them out." So I waited. The next morning I called my daughter, Maya. She lived 3 states away, but when she heard the tremor in my voice, she didn't hesitate. "Dad," she said softly, "what happened?" I told her everything, every cruel word, every receipt, every lie. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then, calm and steady, "Don't do anything yet. I'll handle it. Just promise me you won't confront them until I get there." I promised. For the next 2 days, I played the part of a quiet old man. I made breakfast, fixed a few things around the house, even smiled when Brianna showed me her design plans. Caleb barely spoke. Maybe guilt was catching up with him. But inside, I was changing. I wasn't broken anymore. I was planning. Every night, I sat by the kitchen window and wrote down what I knew. Dates, conversations, screenshots, receipts, the recording. Everything. I wasn't building a wall, I was building a case. By the time Maya's car pulled into the driveway 3 days later, the fog in my chest had lifted. I met her at the door with a small folder labeled House Records. She flipped through it carefully, her brow tightening with every page. Then she looked up, eyes sharp and clear. "Dad," she said, "you've got them. Every piece you need." Her voice carried something I hadn't heard in a long time, certainty. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept without waking up every hour. Because deep down, I knew the tide was turning. And soon, they'd learn what happens when patience stops being silence. Maya stayed for 3 days, and in that short time, she became the calm center of the storm. I'd find her at the dining table each morning, laptop open, papers spread out, coffee going cold beside her. Every few minutes, she'd scribble a note, highlight a line, or glance up with that sharp, steady focus she inherited from her mother. "Dad," she said one morning, "we're not doing this with anger. We'll do it clean, quiet, and legal." That was exactly what I wanted. Not chaos, not shouting, not revenge shouted across rooms. Just truth. Plain and simple. We began with the loan documents. Maya examined the signature, tracing it lightly with her pen. "They didn't even try to match your handwriting properly," she murmured. "They missed your middle initial." She set the papers aside and looked at me. "This isn't just wrong, Dad. It's criminal. The bank will fold as soon as they see this." Then came the renovation receipts. Thousands spent on light fixtures, fake plants, and a new bathtub Brianna had ordered online, all charged to Caleb's own credit cards. Maya shook her head slowly. They're trying to claim ownership through improvements. It's a sneaky angle, but they left a trail a mile wide. I stared out the window while she spoke. The maple trees outside had started to turn. Their leaves, red and gold, covered the swing Eleanor loved. That old metal bench Brianna had installed gleamed under the weak sunlight, cold and soulless, like her taste in everything. What happens now? I asked quietly. Maya smiled faintly. Now, we build the truth, piece by piece. The next morning, I went about my day as usual. I made coffee, fed the birds, and kept my silence. When Brianna floated down the stairs in her silk robe, she smiled like nothing had happened. "Morning, Walter. Sleep well in the guest room?" I smiled back. "Like a rock." She didn't notice the small black folder sitting on the counter or Maya's car parked down the block. Over the next 2 days, my daughter gathered every legal thread we needed. The deed, with my notarized signature clearly required, the voice recording of Brianna's phone call, and Caleb's forged loan documents. She even called the bank manager herself. "Mr. Hayes' signature was forged," she said calmly. "You'll receive a formal notice by morning." When she hung up, she turned to me and said, "Dad, don't confront them yet. Give them a chance to tell the truth. If they don't, we'll make sure they're held accountable." That evening, Caleb came into the kitchen. His eyes were tired, the way guilt wears down a man's face. "Dad, can we talk?" he said quietly. I nodded, setting my cup down. "Of course." He hesitated, glancing toward the stairs as if to check Brianna wasn't listening. "She said you were being difficult," he began, voice soft. "But I didn't realize she'd moved your stuff. I should have stopped it." For a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who used to say sorry even for breaking a window with a baseball. "Caleb," I said, "you forged my name on a loan." His face fell. "Dad, I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean to get caught," I said, my voice low but even. "But you still did it." He ran his hand through his hair, eyes shining with regret. "I just wanted to make her happy. She said it was temporary, that we'd pay it off before you ever knew." "Temporary theft," I murmured, "is still theft." He flinched. Before he could say another word, Maya entered the kitchen. Calm, composed, her tone clipped but controlled. She placed a stack of papers on the table. "Caleb," she said evenly, "we know everything." He went still. "This," she pointed to the forged loan form, "is elder financial fraud. And this," she held up another sheet, "is a voice recording of Brianna planning to steal this house. We have enough to press charges, but we're giving you a chance to fix it." Just then, Brianna walked in, her voice sharp. "What's going on here?" Maya didn't miss a beat. "You have 48 hours to vacate the property. All your claims are void. Here's the agreement. Sign it, and you walk away clean. Refuse, and we go to court." Brianna's face turned pale. "You can't throw us out." I finally spoke, quiet and steady. "I can, and I will. This is my house. Always has been." She looked at Caleb for support, but he couldn't meet her eyes. That silence said everything. Maya slid the pen across the table. "Your choice." Brianna hesitated, but her hands were shaking. She picked up the pen and signed. Caleb followed, his signature small and trembling. When they finished, Maya gathered the papers, tucked them neatly into the folder, and said simply, "We're done here." As they walked upstairs to pack, I sat back in my chair. The house felt different, not lighter yet, but ready. The storm had passed, and the air was still. The stage was set. All I had to do now was wait. The next 48 hours passed in a heavy, unfamiliar quiet. Not the kind that hurts, but the kind that comes after a storm, when the air feels clearer and every sound matters. Brianna spent most of that day packing, slamming drawers and muttering under her breath. Caleb helped her, silent, shoulders slumped, eyes down. The way guilt sits on a man, you can see it in the way he moves. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I made my coffee like I always did, fed the birds, and sat by the kitchen window as sunlight filled the room. There's something powerful about acting normal when the world around you is crumbling. Maya took care of the final steps, calm, professional, and steady. She got the signed agreement notarized and filed at the county clerk's office that afternoon. It stated, in perfect black and white, Caleb and Brianna Hayes relinquish all claims to the property at 214 Brookhaven Road. It also confirmed Caleb's acknowledgement of forgery in his repayment plan, the $27,500 loan deducted automatically from his wages each month. Clean, legal, irreversible. When the moving truck pulled up that evening, I stood by the porch and watched. Brianna carried her bags without a word. Her face was pale, lips tight. Caleb followed slowly, hands shaking as he loaded their last box. When he turned around, his eyes met mine. For the first time in months, he looked small, not in size, but in spirit. "Dad," he said quietly. I'm sorry." I nodded. "I know." He hesitated. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted her to be happy." I took a breath, slow and steady. "And you thought risking your father's home would make that happen?" He looked down, shame written all over his face. "Son," I said softly, "you can rebuild your life. But start with truth this time. It's lighter to carry." His chin trembled, but he nodded. Then he turned and walked toward the truck. Brianna was already inside, her eyes fixed on her phone. She didn't look back. Not once. I didn't stop them. I didn't shout. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, watching the truck roll down the street, its taillights glowing red against the dusk. And when the sound of the engine faded, the silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. That night, I walked through the house slowly, room by room. The air felt different, lighter, freer. I opened the door to my old bedroom. The bed frame leaned against the wall, waiting to be rebuilt. The boxes labeled Dad's stuff sat quietly in the corner. I took out the cracked photo of Eleanor, replaced the glass, and hung it right back where it belonged, above the bed. "Welcome home," I whispered. The next morning, I made pancakes for Maya. She smiled over her coffee and said, "It feels different in here, Dad, like the house is breathing again." I smiled back. It is. Weeks passed, and word spread fast. Caleb's company discovered the forgery when the loan defaulted. He was demoted, and part of his pay was garnished to cover the debt. Brianna picked up a job at a small real estate office 2 towns over. Eventually, they separated. I didn't rejoice. Not really, but I did feel settled. Months later, on a quiet Sunday evening, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, Caleb stood there, thinner, older, holding an envelope. "I wanted you to have this," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a check, his first full repayment installment. "I'm trying, Dad," he said softly. I nodded. "Good, keep trying." He lingered for a moment, glancing around the house. "You fixed the room." "I did," I said. "And this time, it stays mine." He gave a faint smile and turned to leave. I watched him walk down the driveway, his silhouette fading into the quiet evening. When I closed the door, the peace that filled the room was deep, not the silence of loss, but the stillness of balance restored. And in that silence, I finally felt free. It's strange how peace returns, not with noise, not with applause, but with quiet. For months, this house had carried the weight of tension. Every room felt smaller, every corner colder. But when the last box left, it was like the walls finally exhaled. I walked through that house, touching the old wood railings, the photographs, the walls Eleanor once painted herself. It wasn't about winning. It never was. It was about reclaiming dignity, one quiet truth at a time. People talk about revenge like it's fire, but I've learned real revenge is calm. It's patient. It's making things right without losing yourself in the process. I still think of Caleb often. He visits sometimes, mostly on Sundays. We talk about small things, the weather, his work, how he's saving again. He's rebuilding in his own way, and that's enough for me. Brianna's name rarely comes up, and that's fine. Some lessons come too late to share. The night I finally slept in my room again, I left the window open. The air was cool, the curtains swayed softly, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like the house recognized me again. I looked at Eleanor's photo above the bed and whispered, "You were right, love. Patience wins." Because that's what this was. Not anger, not bitterness. just the quiet reclaiming of what was already mine. They claimed my bedroom. My daughter cut me off for 12 long years. Then one morning, she showed up at my door, with her husband, their designer luggage, and a smirk that could curdle blood. She said, "Dad, since you're a millionaire now, we're moving in." I smiled out of joy, but out of something colder. Because she had no idea what I'd learned in those 12 years, and what I had planned for her next. Before I tell you what happened next, I just want to thank you for being here. If you're listening right now, take a moment to subscribe, and let me know where you're tuning in from. Every story I share carries a piece of my life, some painful, some healing, but all of them are lessons worth passing on. Your support reminds me that no matter how old we get, we're never too old to keep learning, and never too old to share the truth. My name's Samuel Whitaker, though most folks around town still call me Mr. Whitaker. The shop teacher who could fix anything except, it seems, his own family. I'm 72 now. My knees creak louder than the floorboards, my hands are slower than they used to be, and I've learned that silence has a sound all its own. Mine hums through the mornings, somewhere between the kettle's whistle and the slow tick of the old clock above my kitchen door. Every day starts the same way. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream. I sit by the window and watch the light crawl up over the lake, touching the old oak tree I planted the day my daughter Lauren was born. Back then, life was simple. I worked 6 days a week at Oak Ridge High, teaching kids how to turn rough wood into something beautiful. Lauren used to sit on my workbench with sawdust in her hair, swinging her legs and asking 100 questions I never minded answering. I used to joke that she'd inherit the world one day. I just didn't know she'd try to take mine. After her mother passed, it was just the two of us. I did everything I could to keep her world steady. College tuition, her first car, even half her wedding expenses, all from years of patching roofs, saving every dime, and saying no to myself so I could say yes to her. When she married Ethan, I gave them my blessing and half my savings, telling them, "You can always make more money, but you can't make more time." Funny thing is, time became the thing they stole most. At first, the calls just got shorter. Then the holidays got quieter. Until one Christmas, I sat at my table with 2 plates, one untouched. The next year, no invitation came at all. Eventually, 12 years passed like a long stretch of empty road. No calls, no cards, no visits. People ask if I was angry. I wasn't, not at first. I was hurt in the quiet way that seeps into your bones. That kind of hurt doesn't burn, it lingers. I told myself she was busy, that she'd call when life settled down. But life has a cruel way of settling without you. When I retired, I sold my old tools one by one. Some of my former students, now grown, helped me clear out the shop. One of them, Terry, handed me an envelope on my last day. "You should try your luck once in a while, Mr. W," he said. Inside was a lottery ticket. I laughed, tucked it into my Bible, and forgot about it. Months later, when I found it again and saw the numbers, I nearly spilled my coffee. It wasn't the grand prize, but it was enough to change a man's life. $3.6 million after taxes. Enough to fix my roof, travel a little, and finally live without worrying which bill to pay first. I didn't tell anyone. Old habits die hard. Money doesn't make you young again. It just makes growing old quieter. I bought a small house near Lakewood, filled it with peace and purpose. Mornings were for gardening, afternoons for reading, and evenings for cooking. I wasn't lonely, I was content. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting on anyone. But peace has a strange way of warning you before it disappears. It was a Thursday morning, still, bright, perfect. The kettle had just started to sing when I heard tires crunching on the gravel drive. Through the window, I saw a black SUV gleaming in the sunlight, 2 figures inside. When the doors opened, my breath caught. It was Lauren, my daughter. After 12 silent years, she stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Ethan followed behind, dragging 2 expensive suitcases up my porch. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe she'd come home because she missed me. But as she walked closer, I could see it, the confidence of someone coming to claim, not to reconcile. She hadn't come for me. She'd come for what she thought was hers. I stood there, coffee cooling in my hand, watching the peace I'd built, brick by brick, begin to crack beneath her heels. But that peace was about to end. Lauren stood on my doorstep like she owned the place. Her hair was perfect, her perfume too strong, her smile rehearsed. Behind her stood Ethan, holding 2 matching leather suitcases, the kind of luggage people buy to look successful, not because they travel. "Dad," she said softly, that sugary tone she used to get what she wanted as a child. "It's been so long." 12 years, I said flatly. Long enough for a person to forget what their father looks like. Her eyes darted away. "You've done well for yourself. This place is beautiful, cozy." She looked past me, already scanning the living room like an appraiser. "Must feel strange being here all alone." "I've learned to like the quiet," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." They walked in with the confidence of people who assumed they were already welcome. Ethan's polished shoes clicked on the wooden floor, his eyes flicking to the family photographs on the mantel. I could tell he was doing math, adding, subtracting, estimating what could be liquidated. He finally spoke, his voice smooth but hollow. "We heard about your good fortune, Sam. Lauren's been worried about you. Handling all that money alone isn't safe. People might take advantage." I almost laughed. "People like who?" Lauren's voice rose an octave. "Dad, that's not what he means. We just thought, it's not healthy for you to live out here all by yourself. You need family around. People who care." "Family," I repeated quietly. "You mean the same family that didn't call once in 12 years? The silence that followed could have split the room in two. She shifted uncomfortably. Ethan cleared his throat, stepping into the role of savior. "We've been through a lot these past few years. The market's been rough. My firm hit a few bumps. We thought maybe it'd be good for all of us if we stayed here a while. Just until things even out." Ah, there it was, the ask. I nodded slowly, then gestured toward the living room sofa. "Let's talk about this family reunion of yours." They sat, trying to keep their posture polite while their eyes roamed the room. Lauren's hand rested lightly on Ethan's knee, a subtle signal that she was still in control. I sat across from them, my coffee cooling on the table between us. "So," I began, "tell me what you think you're entitled to." Lauren flinched, as if I'd slapped her. Ethan blinked, then gave a weak laugh. "Entitled? Sam? No one's entitled to anything. This is just about helping each other." "Helping?" I leaned forward slightly. "That's funny, because the last time we spoke, my so-called help was an embarrassment to you." Lauren's face paled. "Dad, that was years ago. I was upset." I cut her off. "You were 31 years old, Lauren, old enough to know that words leave scars." Ethan shifted in his seat. "We were both under pressure. It was a mistake." "Mistake," I repeated slowly. "Do you know what a mistake is? A mistake is leaving the oven on. What you did was a decision." She tried to smile through the sting. "We just thought, after all that time, maybe we could start over, build something again. As a family." "Build," I said, chuckling under my breath. "You can't rebuild something you deliberately burned to the ground." The words hit her like cold water. For a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw the panic underneath. Ethan looked away, pretending to admire the furniture. "You've had some financial trouble, haven't you?" I asked. Ethan froze. Lauren tensed. "How did you—" "I still live in the same town you grew up in," I said calmly. "People talk, especially when they see fancy cars getting repossessed and credit collectors knocking on doors." Neither of them spoke. I could feel their embarrassment turning to anger. Good. Truth stings, but it cleans. Finally, Lauren stood. "We just wanted to reconnect, Dad. You don't have to throw it in our faces." I stayed seated, my voice steady. "You didn't come to reconnect. You came because you heard a number, and that number had commas in it." Her face twisted. "You're wrong." "Am I?" I asked softly. "Then tell me, why did you show up with suitcases?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even Ethan, who always had something slick to say, stared at the floor. I stood slowly, letting the chair creak. "You two think you've come here to rescue me, but you're wrong. I'm not the one who needs saving." Lauren's lower lip trembled. "Dad, please, we can make this right." "Maybe," I said. "But that depends on what kind of people you really are." She blinked. "What do you mean?" I looked between them, my daughter and her husband, Two strangers in expensive clothes, and for the first time in years I felt completely calm. It means this isn't over yet. You came here thinking you'd take control of my life, but by the time this is done, you'll understand what real accountability feels like. I turned toward the window, letting the sunlight catch the steam rising from my coffee. My reflection stared back, older, wiser, unbreakable. And in that moment, I made myself a promise. They thought I'd let it go. They thought I'd stay quiet. But they were wrong. That's when I knew I would not stay silent. That night, after they left, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt hollow. The kind of silence that hums inside your chest and won't go away. Their voices still echoed faintly in the corners of the room, like cigarette smoke that lingers long after the flame has died. I sat in my old armchair, watching the shadows stretch across the floor. The clock ticked slow and heavy, each sound a reminder of the years that had slipped away, years of waiting for a phone call that never came, for a daughter who'd chosen distance over love. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the good kind I saved for bad nights, and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold and clean. Across the yard, the lake caught the moonlight and shimmered like polished steel. I used to sit out there when Lauren was little. She'd fall asleep in my lap while we watched the fireflies dance, her tiny fingers curled around my thumb. I used to whisper promises into her hair, that I'd always protect her, that she'd never be alone. I kept those promises. She didn't. The first few years after she cut me off were the hardest. I'd call and get her voicemail. Sometimes I'd leave a message, but after a while, even that felt foolish. I sent cards that came back unopened, letters that never got replies. I remember one Thanksgiving. I drove 2 hours to her city with a box of homemade pecan pie. But when I reached her building, she'd already moved. No note, no forwarding address. I sat in my truck for a long time, the pie cooling on the passenger seat, until I realized I didn't even know where my daughter lived anymore. When folks at church asked how she was doing, I'd smile and say, "Busy, you know how kids are." But the truth was uglier. The truth was, I wasn't part of her life at all. Over time, loneliness became its own kind of company. You stop setting out 2 plates for dinner. You stop checking your phone before bed. Eventually, you stop hoping. And when hope finally goes quiet, you find peace in the routine. But peace can be fragile. And when she walked back into my life that morning, she didn't knock it down gently. She shattered it like glass. I sat there on the porch, watching my breath drift in the air. They thought they could use me again, that old dependable dad who always said yes. But I wasn't that man anymore. The 12 years of silence had carved something into me, something colder, stronger, and less forgiving. I finished the whiskey and stared at the empty glass. Inside, the reflection of the moon trembled, and I could almost hear my late wife's voice. "Don't let bitterness turn you into them." I smiled a little. She always had a way of cutting through the noise. No, I wasn't bitter. I was clear, and clarity is sharper than anger ever could be. I went back inside, turned on the old lamp in the corner, and let its soft light fill the room. The quiet wasn't lonely anymore. It was focus. On the table sat the old photo album I hadn't touched in years. I opened it. There she was, Lauren at 6, with a missing front tooth and sawdust in her hair. Lauren at 12, holding her school trophy with pride. And Lauren at 21, smiling in her graduation gown, her arm around me. That was the last picture we took together. I stared at it for a long time, feeling that familiar sting behind my eyes. Then I closed the album and exhaled. Tears don't fix what's broken. Action does. I walked to my study, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a folder I'd been keeping for years. My insurance, my backup plan. Inside were names, numbers, and financial contacts. My lawyer, my accountant, and Frank Dobson, a retired investigator I'd met through a friend. Frank had once told me, "Sam, people think old age makes you slow, but it just gives you time to notice what everyone else misses." He was right. And that night I noticed everything. The way Ethan had avoided eye contact when I mentioned money. The way Lauren's voice trembled just before she smiled. The way they'd already called this place home. They thought they were manipulating an old man. They had no idea I'd already learned how to outthink the people who underestimated me. I sat back in my chair, listening to the rain start tapping on the windows. Every drop seemed to whisper the same thing. They took from you once. Don't let them do it again. For the first time in 12 years, I wasn't sad. I wasn't confused. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. I turned off the light, looked out over the dark water, and let one final thought settle deep inside me, the kind that doesn't fade when the night ends. I began to think, very carefully. The next morning I woke before sunrise. Sleep hadn't come easy, but clarity had. There's a quiet power in knowing you've been played, and deciding not to react right away. In my 72 years, I've learned that the smartest moves are made slowly, with a steady hand. When you rush, you reveal yourself. When you wait, you watch people reveal themselves. Lauren and Ethan had no idea that every word, every twitch, every nervous glance from yesterday had been quietly cataloged in my mind. I knew their type now. People who think charm can disguise motive. They'd spent over a decade pretending I didn't exist, and now, suddenly, I was their golden ticket. They thought they'd moved in on an old man too soft to say no. But that was the thing. They weren't moving in. They were walking straight into a lesson. I started my morning routine like any other day. Black coffee, newspaper, a few stretches for my bad hip. The difference was what sat beside the paper. A notepad and pen. On it, I wrote 3 words at the top. Protect, expose, rebuild. That would be my plan. 3 steps, no shortcuts. Step 1, protect. I called my financial advisor Greg, a sharp kid with a brain wired for numbers and a heart still untouched by greed. Greg, I said, I need to make sure my estate is airtight. He laughed at first. You worried about taxes, Sam? Not taxes, I said. People. I hadn't seen Ethan's face look that tense since their wedding day. The day he whispered in my ear that I'd done a decent job raising her. Decent. That word had haunted me for years. Now it was my turn to show him just how decent I could be. I called Frank Dobson, the retired investigator I trusted. Frank, I said, I need a favor. Quiet work. He chuckled on the other end. You catching a thief, Sam? I smiled. Something like that. By that evening, Frank was on the case. He still had connections in every corner of the state. Within a few days, he'd find out what my daughter and her husband had really been up to. Debts, lies, maybe worse. Step 3. Rebuild. Not my house or my fortune. Those were fine. I meant rebuilding the boundaries that had crumbled years ago. If Lauren wanted access to my life again, she'd have to earn it, brick by brick. And if she wanted to manipulate me, she'd find that every door was locked tight, and I held every key. A week later, the first report came in. Frank sent it in a sealed envelope. I opened it at the kitchen table, where the morning light hit the paper just right. What I read didn't surprise me. It confirmed what I already knew. They were drowning in debt, nearly $300,000 in unpaid loans, credit cards, and failed investments. Ethan's so-called consulting firm hadn't had a legitimate client in almost a year. They'd borrowed money from Nora's parents, claimed it was for a business expansion, but had spent most of it maintaining their image. They were living a lie built on borrowed time. And worse yet, the investigation uncovered something darker. They'd told relatives that I was losing my memory, that I wasn't fit to manage money anymore. They'd planted the story early, setting the stage to take control of my assets if I ever slipped. That cut deeper than anything, not because of the lie, but because of how prepared it was. They'd planned this long before showing up. I folded the papers carefully, slid them back into the envelope, and felt that slow, deliberate calm settle in my chest again. Little did they know, they weren't the only ones planning something. That evening, I invited them for dinner. Lauren's voice on the phone was cheerful, forced, but cheerful. We'd love to, Dad, she said. It'll be good to catch up. I could almost hear Ethan in the background coaching her on what to say. When they arrived, the table was already set. Steak, mashed potatoes, green beans, the kind of meal she'd loved as a kid. Her eyes softened for a brief second when she saw it, and for a flicker of time, I saw the little girl she used to be. But the moment passed when she spotted the stack of legal papers on the counter. What's that? She asked casually. Oh, I said, just some estate documents. I've been reviewing things lately. Her interest sharpened immediately. Ethan leaned slightly forward. Estate documents? Mm-hmm. I said, sipping my water. Figured I should start thinking ahead. Never know when it'll be time to put things in order. The tension in the room thickened like smoke. They thought they were in. They had no idea they were already being written out. After dinner, I walked them to the door, smiling the same quiet smile that used to calm her down as a child. "Good seeing you both," I said warmly. "Maybe next week we can talk about your plans," she offered quickly. "Oh, I have plans," I said, holding her gaze. "Big ones." The stage was set. All I had to do was wait. A week passed before I made my move. By then, Frank had finished his full report, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Fraudulent business filings, fake medical excuses, even a small investigation pending under Ethan's name. Every page I read stripped away another layer of illusion. They weren't victims of circumstance. They were architects of deceit. That Sunday morning, I brewed my coffee, opened the curtains, and looked out at the lake. The water was calm, like it always was before a storm. It was time. Lauren and Ethan arrived right on cue. They always did when they wanted something. She had that same too-sweet smile, and he had that same hand resting on her shoulder, like ownership disguised as affection. "Dad," she greeted brightly. "We brought breakfast. Thought we could spend the day together." Her tone was honey, but her eyes were knives. "Wonderful," I said, stepping aside. "Come in, let's sit." They followed me into the living room, where the sunlight hit the coffee table just right. The table where I'd laid out 2 manila folders. I gestured toward them. "Before we eat, I'd like to show you something." Lauren hesitated. "What's all this?" "Just a little research," I said. "Seems my curiosity got the better of me." I slid the first folder toward them. "Your financial records." Ethan's smile faltered. I don't think that's necessary." "Oh, I do," I said calmly. I opened it for them, 1 page at a time. Maxed out credit cards, 3 overdue loan payments, a second mortgage. And this, I tapped the paper gently. The letter from the bank about foreclosure proceedings. Lauren's jaw tightened. "You had no right." I cut her off with a raised hand. "I had every right the moment you showed up at my door demanding to move in. That was your mistake, Lauren. You assumed age meant weakness." Ethan shifted in his seat, his face draining of color. "This is private," he said quietly. "You went too far." "No," I said. "You did. When you told people I was senile, when you claimed I wasn't capable of managing my money anymore." The room went silent. Only the clock ticked. Lauren's voice came out small. "Dad, we didn't mean—" "Stop," I said sharply, my tone enough to freeze her mid-sentence. "Don't insult me with more lies. You planned this. Both of you. You wanted to take over my assets." I leaned back slowly, letting the tension hang in the air. "Now let's move on to the second folder." Ethan swallowed hard. "What's in that one?" "Police reports," I said, flipping it open. His face turned gray. I read aloud, "Filed by one Marcus Wheeler, your former business partner. He alleges embezzlement of $50,000 from company funds. Evidence submitted to the district attorney's office." Lauren gasped. "Ethan?" He shot her a glare. "It's not what it sounds like." I smiled thinly. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it sounds like. The DA's office is still deciding whether to press charges. But don't worry, Marcus reached out. Said he'd be willing to drop everything if restitution is made immediately." Her voice cracked. "You talked to him." "I did," I said, standing now. "He's a good man. Better than either of you gave him credit for. He thought maybe, just maybe, your newfound wealthy father could help pay it off." Lauren's lips trembled. "So that's what this is? You're just here to humiliate us?" I took a deep breath and looked her in the eye. "No, sweetheart. This isn't about humiliation. It's about consequence." Ethan's voice broke. "We're going to lose everything." "Yes," I said softly. "Everything you tried to steal from others. But maybe that's what it takes to remember who you were before greed took over." I walked to my desk and pulled out one last document, this one neatly folded in an envelope. "This," I said, setting it down, "is contact information for a bankruptcy attorney. He's the best in the state. I'll give you $25,000, half for him, half to begin paying back what you owe." But there are conditions. Lauren's eyes widened. Conditions. Yes, you enter therapy, real therapy. Individually, not together. You make restitution to every person you've defrauded. And you get real jobs, honest work. No more schemes, no more pretending. You rebuild from the ground up. Ethan rubbed his temples. That'll take years. Maybe that's how long it'll take for you to remember what integrity feels like. He looked defeated, truly defeated. But Lauren, she looked broken. For the first time, her arrogance was gone. Dad, she whispered, I don't deserve your help. No, I said quietly. You don't, but you need it. And I need to know you can still become the person I once believed you were. She began to cry, silent and small. For a moment, I almost reached out. Almost. But mercy without lesson isn't love, it's surrender. And I wasn't surrendering anymore. You have one day to decide, I said finally. If you accept, I'll call the attorney. If not, you'll face the charges Marcus is ready to file. The clock struck 3. The sound filled the room like a final verdict. They stood, speechless. Lauren reached for my hand, but I didn't move. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Go, I said softly. Think. Choose wisely. They left without another word. The door closed behind them, and I stood there, the echo of silence washing through the house. For the first time in 12 years, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. And in that silence, I finally felt free. The next morning, the sun rose slower than usual. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the steam curl and fade, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Not the quiet kind that comes from being alone, but the deep kind that comes from finally standing your ground. At exactly 8:47, the phone rang. Lauren's voice was soft, trembling, real. Dad, she said, we've thought about it. We'll do it, all of it. The therapy, the restitution, the jobs. We want to make this right. For a moment, I said nothing. I just listened to the sound of her breathing on the other end. Then I asked her one question. If I hadn't won the money, Lauren, if I were still living in that small apartment, would you have ever called me? The line went quiet, then barely above a whisper. She said, no, probably not. I was too ashamed. It hurt, but it was the first honest thing she'd said to me in over a decade. Thank you, I said. That's what I needed to hear. I told her I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I was done letting the past poison what was left of my life. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's reclaiming your peace from people who never valued it. Before we hung up, I said, this isn't a rescue, Lauren. This is your last chance. Prove to me that you can live with honesty. Show me that you've learned. Her voice cracked. I will, Dad. I promise. After the call, I sat there for a long time. Outside, the lake shimmered with morning light. The house felt alive again, not because they'd come back, but because I'd finally reclaimed my place in it. 2 years later, they would rebuild their lives from scratch. And me? I'd wake up each morning knowing that wealth isn't measured in money. It's measured in boundaries, in peace, and in knowing when to walk away. Yes, my daughter cut me off for 12 years, until she heard I was a millionaire. But in the end, the richest thing I ever gained was freedom. Would you have done the same if it were you? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of strength, dignity, and quiet revenge.